Building agents in Microsoft Copilot Studio is great, but what do you do after you're done building an agent? How do you document how it works? How do you tell people how to access this new agent? Or simpler, even just how to use it? And potentially, most importantly, how do you tell IT teams how to manage it and troubleshoot it in case errors pop up? These are all super important things to consider that we are talking about in this solo PowerTalks episode today, right now. Hey, my name is Griffin Lickfeld, the host of the Citizen Developer Channel and PowerTalks podcast. And today, like I said in the intro and the title and the thumbnail, we are talking about agent handoff, what I might call, or maybe delivery handoff, or hey, we have now built an agent. What do we do? And that's process after. And I would say specifically coming from my experience, I'm a consultant where I'm building these sort of IT solutions for companies. So I'm coming from the perspective of like I built an agent, maybe not necessarily for my company. While I think this conversation still is very applicable to you, because if you've built an agent for your company, you should document how it works and what you've built, as well, just to kind of help sell the value that it brings to your company. So I think this is valuable, but I will say I probably will unintentionally speak to that person who is kind of building agents for a different organization. So with that being said, we're talking about what to do after building an agentic solution or building a Copilot agent. And really, there's two main things we want to accomplish while we're doing that. And that is to encourage end user adoption, right? Like we want people to use this agent. We want the company to, they spent whether time or money, or you spent time and money on building this thing. We want it to be, used and leveraged as a good tool. The other thing is, how do we encourage client ownership? And what I mean by that is, like, how do we encourage, okay, we built this thing, we know all the details of how it works, but now it's your turn to go and own it. Because like I said, a lot of times as consultants, we're not working with businesses forever, right? Like our time with them comes to an end. And so thinking about those two things is what we really want to try to hit on today. And I will say this episode is going to be a little different than the rest of them. I'm going to do some like screen sharing here in a little bit and walk through a template that you can download, a Copilot user guide template that you can download with the first link down in the description down below. And this is going to do, at least what I think, a really good job in speaking to these two parts. And really is a document that if you just plug in maybe the company's logo and the name of your agent, this is pretty much ready, and something that you can give to the client and be super valuable. So like I said, follow the first link down in the description down below to get that sent directly to you. So with that being said, like any IT enhancement or any piece of software, there needs to be documentation, right? And particularly, this can be particularly tricky with AI because it can be so new. And so there's a couple of nuances that are important to think about, is that it's tricky since it's creative in nature, right? Like a lot of times, computers work in a very binary sense, right? It either works or it doesn't. It does this thing. Well, generative AI and Copilot agents are very different in a lot of ways. And so documenting how it works, I think, is particularly important, and having disclaimers in there that, hey, this is naturally creative. We've put these safeguards in place, but it might not have super standardized responses. And I think most organizations recognize that and are okay with that. As well as talking about this other audience of talking to the IT people. As much as IT pros are pros, and I would not be where I am without IT pros, Copilot and generative AI is still new and scary to a lot of even those people. And so it's important just to remember that you are probably, at least at this point in time, going to be overcoming those hurdles in some way. And building together some kind of documentation, I think, is a valuable way to help overcome that. Now, it's important that you're kind of, like I said, I guess I just alluded to, that you're addressing two people. You're addressing these IT people, and you're also addressing the end users. And what's really tricky is that these two people have different questions about the agent, right? They care about different things. The IT people, as you can tell, I'm referring to some notes here, but the IT people want to know, how does the agent work? What is the agent connected to? Like, what security and everything? Like, what are the data loss prevention policies? What are the custom connectors? What sort of information can it access? How to troubleshoot any errors if Microsoft introduces a bug or they start to notice that it's not working or not responding, and how to modify the agent, how to maybe understand the topics that have been built and how to update them appropriately, and different things like that. While the end user, they don't care about any of that. They care about, what can I do with this agent? Where can I use this agent? Is it in Teams? Is it on a website? Where is it? And they might ask, how does it work? But really what they're asking is, how can I use this agent well to save me time, right? And so recognizing that, okay, how can we address all of these questions all within some documentation is really important. And so that is what we're going to do now. So let me go ahead and share my screen here. This is a Copilot Studio user guide. Again, shameless plug, completely free, but there's a link down in the description down below that you can use to download this and get it sent directly to you. So anyways, I just kind of wanted to walk through the parts or the areas of this document, and whether you use this or not, maybe it can just help spur some ideas of what documenting agent solutions could look like for you. Um, and I've also gone ahead and highlighted everything in this like square brackets in yellow that I know needs to be updated. So if you're using this template, you can kind of just look out for that and skip a lot of the other stuff. Um, Here's our title page. Here is our table of contents. Now, the beginning of this document is going to speak more to the end user at first, or I guess maybe the organization as a whole. And especially if you are um, a consulting in some capacity, you need to sell the business value of your agent as well, because they spend a lot of time and money likely with you. And so this is just explaining some of the overview of Copilot Studio and agents a little bit, as well as kind of the purpose of this guide and how it can help them understand what they need to know. We go into a little bit of a Copilot Studio overview, and there are some cool Microsoft graphics in here as well. And this just kind of talks about where Microsoft Copilot Studio fits into the grand scheme of things as far as pieces and whatnot. It kind of just talks about, again, you can see here some of these key features. Talking about low-code interface, the integrations, the distribution, as in like the channels that you can send it to. This here is where we start to get into what is more specifically about the client. So providing a description, you can likely repurpose what's stated in the blueprint or the statement of work or the contract or anything like that. And here's now what we're talking about, what the agent does. Okay. So the goal of the project was to, speaking to that business value with the support of the client's name. We've customized a Copilot agent in Copilot Studio that focuses on, whatever it focuses on, um, and continue to provide more of that. Then we get into how does this agent work. I hope I'm not flying too fast. I think there's much more value and details with the later half of this document. Um, this starts to talk about how does the agent work. So this talks about topics, channels, connectors, knowledge sources, variables, generative AI settings, all these sorts of things. And so this kind of helps answer both people's questions, in my opinion. Here's kind of the disclaimer about generative AI that I guess I mentioned that you probably should have in some capacity. Um, but this does give you a lot of flexibility, yada 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 yada. So here are some outlines of this is answering that question of like, how, for the IT people, how are we controlling it? How are we making this more standardized? How are we making sure it's just not going off the deep end using generative AI tools? This outlines some of the generative AI settings that you can configure within Microsoft Copilot Studio for your agent. So specifically, how should your Copilot interact with people? Kind of are we using classic or generative? Um, how strict should the content moderation be? And mentioning what setting you've selected within Microsoft Copilot Studio. That's kind of what this section is here, is outlining the different settings or guardrails that you've put in place. And you'll see that these pretty explicitly match to settings within Microsoft Copilot Studio, at least around the time of recording. The settings are definitely changing, especially with new models and everything coming in. But nonetheless, this could absolutely be added to, and everything there. But some kind of setting around, hey, here is how we're managing generative I think speaks volumes to organizations. If we continue on here, this then, again, still under the how does this agent work, this then talks about the channels that we're deploying to. So you can list out all of the channels. I'm guessing in most scenarios it's not a bunch, but list them all here and add whatever sort of explanation you would like. There is already a link to some more Microsoft documentation because we recognize that channels are going to be constantly changing and everything that are in there. This then starts to introduce agent topics. I guess I just realized that this looks kind of ugly, but that's okay. I'll fix it before you get your template. But this talks about a little bit what topics are, because I don't think they're always that intuitive, at least not the name topics. I don't have a suggestion for what they should be named instead. I think topics works, but it is kind of tricky. And so this just kind of explains what the various topics are. And then it goes into talking about, here we actually outline the specific topics, all of the topics within the agent. And I would recommend doing the system ones that get automatically created for you, as well as all the custom ones. That's what this topic type is here. And outlining, the topic name, and then also what the topic does, and especially the trigger of this topic. What causes this thing to start? Outlining what it does, and everything. And again, even for the system ones, and you can just put system in here or custom, dependent on the topic type. So outlining the topic is really going to answer that IT professionals of like, if there's an issue, where maybe should I go, or how does this thing work? Where is it connecting to these different things? Outlining all of those topics and explaining all of that information in here would be super valuable. Here as well, it just goes into more detail about the specific topics. So I would outline the topics again in these bullet points, and provide maybe more explanation on the description, on the actual trigger. So specifically, if you're using an agent triggered trigger, um, maybe that, I don't remember the exact name of it, but the one where it uses generative AI to trigger, it's kind of the default one. Putting in the text that you have in the description of that topic, adding that to this here, I think would be super valuable, because they can understand why this thing is happening if it is. And then outlining any sort of conditional branching or logic as best you can. So, hey, we're going to try to gather this information. If we have it, it does this. If we don't have it, it does this. If we do have it, then it has these three options. It does this, this, or this, depending on this, or, outlining, again, just maybe in like a paragraph, or if you wanted to use bullet points, what that could look like for each topic. Then we get into knowledge sources again. So answering that question, what does my agent have access to? How does it kind of work? And this could apply to both IT professionals and end users. They might want to know, say I need to update a knowledge source, or I just want to go see the source for myself. They can come here and do that. And so this is just going to kind of outline what knowledge sources are a little bit. Here are some available ones, and then adding all of the knowledge sources to your agent. And this I would pretty much just take from whatever you have in Microsoft Copilot Studio. So when you add a knowledge source, you can set the name and description, and just putting those names and descriptions in this table here. It's just good to be outside of Copilot Studio and documented as well. Okay, this is an important section, and this is something that would not be valuable to an end user at all, but I think is something that is really important to document, and that is entities and variables. So this outlines what entities and variables are. Um, Not going to go over that in this episode, but outlining all of the variables and the descriptions of those variables, the entities those variables use, all within this table is super important, because it's kind of like documenting, it's kind of like building an ERD diagram, basically, right? Like, say you've built a Power App for a company, and you've built all these custom tables and they're all related to each other. They want to understand how these things are related in a very similar way. Obviously, variables are very different than like tables in a database, but like, as foundational as tables are to an app, variables are as foundational to agents. And so it's really important just to document, hey, here are all of the variables that we're using, especially if an agent is throwing an error. It typically is regards to a variable. And so here, in that error, they could likely see or be able to decipher what variable is causing this error and what does it do? What is this variable here for? And so that is kind of the purpose of this section here. And so outlining all the variables, the types of variables, this would basically be the entity, the variable type, and then describing the variable and what topics this variable is used in, I think is very important as well. Is it a global variable? Is it a topic variable? Is it an environment variable? Whatever, all those sorts of things. So adding all of your variables here, I think, is tedious, but I think it's very valuable and important, especially to an IT team. There's a whole bunch of other Copilot settings, and if you feel like they are valuable in any capacity to document, I do have a section here for those. Any additional Copilot settings, this could be things regarding security and authentications, skills, voice and languages, all of those sort of things. Just outlining these settings that you have defined that maybe aren't the default, or if they are, that are particularly notable, just adding them in here just for the sake of having them in here. And again, not to double dip with the generative AI settings, but just any other additional settings or considerations that you have set up here. I think most notably being the security, like the authentication settings and things like that. The authentication and the language settings, I guess I would say, to simplify it, I would at least document those. Okay, a lot of the rest of this is kind of more like general stuff. It's not really specific to an agent that you've built, but again, answers that if something goes wrong, how can I fix it? And so this is, how IT pros can help support the agent. Talks about setup, user training, ongoing support, security and privacy, customization and optimization. Um, there's also a section for, outlining general use and best practices, and this talks about creating topics and customizing templates and testing and analytics and all sorts of stuff. As you can see, there's nothing yellow on this. It's kind of just some general knowledge about how to build agents in Microsoft Copilot Studio that likely could be valuable to somebody that is already reviewing this document, as opposed to having to go and say like Google search it or something instead. Um, as well as a little troubleshooting and common issues, and talks about just maybe some common issues and what might be causing those things. And then we have our conclusion with a nice, beautiful, cool graphic, and as well as just some further resources to links to Microsoft documentation, an implementation guide, a Copilot success kit, as well as Microsoft Learn, we recommend, and Power Platform Admin Center as always. So that is the document. I hope you find that valuable, at least in some way. And like I said, for the third time, you can get this template for free with the link down in the description down below, the first link. But thank you so much for staying to the end of the video. If you feel like there's stuff that I missed or things that you think should be in agentic solution documentation, let me know. I would love to know how you would improve this, or what you would add, or what you feel like I missed down in the comments down below. So Thank you so much for being here. My name is Griffin Lickfeld, the host of the Citizen Developer channel and then PowerTalks podcast, and I'm excited to connect with you in the next one.